So today we're going to go through some things to help you with the last 5% of your submission. We're going to go through common first-time AutoCAD errors. We're also going to show you some techniques to maximize the output of your project, and I'm going to show you what happens when we don't fix the errors in our drawings as well. We'll have a bit of fun with it too. Okay, so what I want to do is I'll go through a few student examples. I've taken names off everything, and then you'll see some of the errors that we can pick up by looking at it, and then I'll get you guys to have a look at some of the examples as well and point out what you think is missing too. Okay, just to preface, all of these students, while they did fail the first assessment, we were able to get them across the line into the next assessments and they passed overall. So I don't want you to feel like this is demeaning, showing the students' work that didn't pass, because they did pass overall, and I've taken the names off of everything. So this isn't about being personal and critical. We're just trying to learn from their mistakes and make sure that we all cross that line together. So some of the things that we can pick up here are, it's quite difficult to see what's cut through and not cut through because they're mixing their cut styles. So we've got one wall here with dark lines and a hatch through. We've got a wall here which is white and should have darker lines but doesn't. And then we've got some other arbitrary dot fills inside these walls here as well. So we're mixing standards, we're mixing codes, and it's really difficult to see where's interior and where's exterior because we can't see what the walls are doing. We all know now, as a general rule, we use the dark line with either white on the inside, grey on the inside, or black on the inside. Don't worry about putting fills in at this stage, it just gets confusing. Another thing is ensuring that you use the right hatch for the right material. So this project we know to be floorboards, but they've picked a hatch that has dashes inside their vertical lines, and it just gets a little bit difficult to read what's going on. We're also missing the arrow up for the stairs. So how do we know? Are we going this way up through this door and then this way? Or are we going through this door and then this way up and this is storage? Difficult to tell what's going on there. We've got a few little dashed lines inside pieces. And then finally, there's no windows anywhere here. We can't see any of the glazing lines, can't see any mullions, anything like that. Moving on to the next one. Elevation. Now, I think everyone in this room can see that there's not enough information on this elevation to tell what we're looking at. There's no depth. This could even be a plan. We can't see any people on there, no trees on there, no shadow lines, anything like that. Moving on. Same thing in this section as to what we've seen in both the plan and the elevation. We can't see what's cut through. We're using hatches that aren't architectural drawing convention, so we don't actually know what we're looking at. Anyone that's got diagonal lines trying to show glazing, take them off. We don't use diagonal lines for glazing anymore. Some really old practices will still use that, but as a general rule, in architectural practice now, we just use the grey transparency when we're trying to show glazing. Same thing again in this plan, impossible to see what's cut through. At this point, it looks more like a diagram than an architectural drawing. We really can't see what are our open spaces, what are our closed spaces. There's no doors and no openings through any of these walls, so we can't actually occupy or move through any of the space. Okay? And then once again, we're mixing coding devices for what's cut through. This one here is reasonably competent in the actual drawing and the outline of the axonometry, but it's just missing a lot of that information that layers in depth and clarity into it. So for example, we don't have the contour lines running along this edge here. We can see from this arc that we are traveling along some sort of undulation, some sort of shifting topography, but because we don't have those lateral ground lines coming out of here, or lateral, what are our lines called? Contour lines coming out of there, we can't see that the ground is shifting. We are also missing the shadow coming over the side of the building and some more texture to show where the glazing is, etc. All right, moving on to the next student. This one here, big no-no, is making this huge kind of graphic title. Really unnecessary and doesn't tell us much more than having Carroll House written down here inside the title block. So while you might see some of this sort of stuff in magazines, that's not really architectural drawing. So we'll shift this down into the title block, same as the floor plan as well. And then the big one, and I'm going to show you all how to fix this today, is taking off the watermarks produced by an Autodesk version. Just really takes away from the professionalism of the page. Then in the actual drawing, The windows don't show glazing lines, don't show mullions. We're missing out on our shadow, light, texture, material, all of those things. Next one, same thing again. We also can't tell that we've got void space here. We can't tell what we're above of, so there's no landscape, no context, anything like that. And then the openings really don't make sense for us. So is there a wall here? Is there a glazing line here? What's going on? Are we stepping from material into grass outside here? We're in the upper floor plan, and we still can't really tell what's happening in terms of the walling, in terms of the structure. Similar to the previous student in this section, much like the previous elevation, we can't actually tell that we're looking at a section. So we don't have a solid ground line, we don't have a black or grey hatch underneath here, we don't have shadow lines, we don't have depth of shadow, light, material, texture, all of those things. And then of course, titles and drawing title and watermarks on there as well. This elevation is a little bit more competent, section is a little bit more competent than the previous one, but something that's really missing and really important for all of you is that we can see what is cut through and what is in the background. So if you know the Carroll house, you know that the part that's cut through is stepped along this edge here, but these triangles are actually in the background. And so we should be able to see that famous texture of the shipping containers behind the stairwells. And that would be able to show us that where the stairs are is outside, and where these stepped rectangles are, these are our internal spaces. But we're not reading that in terms of the section at the moment, plus all the other stuff that we talked about before. Again, elevation, really can't tell what's going on, and these textures don't line up with what we know to be true as shipping container facades. So we should have a lot more lines on here, we should have some different layers of gradient to indicate that some are stepping backwards, some are pushing forwards, etc. No people, no ground line, no trees, no context. More. Axonometric is okay-ish, but we're losing all of that beautiful texture and the ribbing of the shipping containers. And we don't have any of the New York context there. Now, we're not expecting you to draw in all of New York City, but at least show some rectangular prisms to indicate that this is in an urban context. Show the line of the footpath along here, show some dotted lines for the street down the middle, show some trees along that edge, whatever's there in terms of the actual context. Shouldn't just be sitting in white space. This drawing, again, now the first thing that stands out for me is a lack of awareness of what the student is doing. So everyone, well, most of you by now will know from looking at this plan form that we're looking at the Rose Seidler house. However, if you check out the title block, they've just copied Studio Bright from the video lecture, assuming that Studio Bright happened to also build the Rose Seidler house. So now that could be a very easy mistake, and they could have meant to fix that up later, but it just shows a lack of checking, a lack of awareness of what they're drawing. So those kind of things really do add up. So just need to be very careful to double check any mistakes like that. Beyond that, of course, we've got the watermarks on the page. The north point is too big and it's hovering outside the title block. And then line weights totally lack control. So there's no depth in terms of what's cut through, what's beyond, what's behind. There's no use of gradients to set the furniture in the distance. All of those things are missing. Same thing beyond here, and this drawing is actually incomplete. There's a lot of missing work in here, no windows, no openings, etc. And then this dashed line for the overhead is way too big. So these dashes are way too long. You want to be about a third of the scale that they're using there. Moving on to their elevation, this material texture is actually incorrect. So it doesn't look like this in terms of the facade. Then we're lacking depth in terms of shadow, light, texture, all those things along there. No people, no trees. This is a very treed landscape behind the Seidler house, so that's all missing. And then they've added a ground line underneath their ground line. This is quite common, but very, very confusing, because what you're actually saying is that there's only a metre of dirt underneath the house. Below that is some sort of abyss, some sort of cavern, something going on there. Now, of course, that can't be true, right? So be very careful that you don't accidentally include any lines below your heavy ground line. So you can put a black mass underneath here to indicate earth or charcoal color or something like that, but just make sure that you don't have a line underneath it. So you'll need the line in order to put the black mass in so that you can put a hatch there, but you need to delete the line afterwards, because otherwise that line tells us that the earth ends, which is incorrect. Same comments here. Even worse this time is that they've now given an end to the earth underneath. So now not only do we have earth finishing here at this point underneath 1 meter, it also finishes here. So we can fall off the edge of the page at the moment. Then this is, I would have called an elevation, but according to the title block, it's a section. Quite a lot of information missing there. Next student. So title block is probably a little bit on the small side. I've said to a few of you in our collaborate sessions and in class that some of you are quite big, but this is probably going too small the other way. Then what is concerning here is that the section markers are actually cutting through the drawing. So your markers should never intersect with the drawing itself. Otherwise, what this line actually represents once it goes inside the house is a material change, right? We said when we have a line between two masses like this or two empty spaces, that's a material change. So your builder is going to ask you, what floor material are we changing from the kitchen into the sitting room, into the living, right? Because you've got that line intersecting with the drawing. So you need to make sure that you trim that way away from the drawing on both sides, the A and the B. Then of course things like we can't see what's cut through, missing out on shadow, light, texture, materials, not enough depth to the line weights. Same comments about the elevation, really difficult to see what is cut through in the section here and what is being elevated. And then there's something really crucial missing from here, which is what? Ground line, perfect. Now the axonometric's not bad. This axonometric would have been passable, but it's missing all of the context. So we know from previous student examples and from looking at this case study that this sits within a beautiful landscape. That there's trees, we have a hill, there's sheep, they have a big veggie patch out the front of the house, the shadows are missing, people are missing, all of those things. So we're just missing a lot of that context there and understanding. And then probably a little bit cheeky and expecting me not to check it, but this section is actually exactly the same as the section on the other page. So sounds like a smart idea to get through your double section by putting it opposite ends of the document, but trust me, it's only 7 pages. We are going to look. Elevations, difficult to read through as well, and then moving through to the plan. Okay, so that's me going through some of the errors. Now what we want to do as an exercise is we're just going to quickly let you have a go at identifying some of the errors. I'm not going to spend too long on each sheet. I just want you to call out what you think is wrong with some of these pages as we go through. So, go ahead. What's missing?
Windows.
Windows, yeah. What's missing about the windows?
No mullions.
No mullions, perfect. What else? Sorry, speak up. Correct, no arrow for the stairs, so we can't see which direction we're going up. All right, we've got lots of these, so we'll quickly move on to the next one. What's missing here? Sorry? Glazing in the windows. What else?
Depth.
Depth, yep. Important one? Solid ground line, can't see any of that. This one? What's missing? Depth of field? Trees are hanging in midair, excellent, good pickup. How could we fix that? Because this is actually sitting in the landscape. This is undulating upwards. We have a hill going up here. So what are they missing that shows that the hill's going upwards? Contour lines, perfect. This one? Contour lines again. Shadow, glazing, etc. What about this one? What's wrong here? It's no information. It's missing a lot. But if you look carefully down here and you understand the context of this drawing, this is actually the basement plan. But you could never tell that from looking at this. So if we're dealing with a basement, we should have black mass all the way around here. It's the same thing when we're cutting through a section and we have black mass underneath it to indicate earth. We would have that same black mass around the edge of these walls because that's where the earth is as well. Because remember, we're underground. We're surrounded by earth. And these walls are acting as a retainer, but we can't tell that from here. And then also, this dash line is way too big to indicate that overhead line or a garage or whatever it's indicating. Good. What about this one? Yep, context, shadow, light, texture. This one?
Dash lines are way too big.
Dash lines are way too big. windows, and I'm looking for an important one that means we might kill ourselves if we're in this house.
Space for the lower ground.
Yeah, so they're missing another line to go over here, or they could put void and leave it as one line. But sorry, doors. Yeah, they're missing doors. Yep. There's another important thing. What's going to stop us from dying if we're on the upper level? Balustrade. There's no balustrade, so what they're indicating to this line is that you could fall down here into this space. What's missing? Ground line. Shadow, light, texture, context, people. This one's borderline, but what's difficult about it considering we're in a section? What makes it hard to read? Where it's cut through, exactly right. So they've left everything at full black, all of their textures, all of their lines, so it's really difficult to read what's cut through. If we spend a long time looking at it, we can see that this outline here is what's cut through, but it's not revealing itself enough. So we need to turn the transparencies on for all of the hatches. We need to start playing with the line weights a little bit more so we get more depth of what's cut through. That one we've seen already. What's missing here? Depth of field, yeah. So this is cut through, this mass over on the left-hand side, and this is cut through this mass on the right-hand side, but none of this in the middle is cut through. Very difficult to read that in this drawing. What's the problem here? What's going on the edges of this sheet? Watermarks. Didn't delete those off. Missing people, missing trees. There's enough said here, not enough information. Okay. So why is it important for us to weed out and to correct the mistakes of our drawings? Let's answer that by looking at some examples. Now, a lot of you would have seen these already online. Bit of fun. But this is the kind of thing that happens when we don't double check our drawings and make sure they're saying what we want them to say, because whatever's on there will be built. Yeah. Good one. Where is the wheelchair toilet? Just up the stairs. Building's on fire. Where's the hydrant? It's behind the handrail. Did you bring your angle grinder? No. So I love this one because students draw this all the time. So we know that our big thick cut lines here indicate that this is being cut through, and we've got the same thickness of cut line on this side indicating that this is being cut through. And so what we end up with is the builder building exactly that. Both of these elements of stairs are at the same level in the same plane. No one told me which way up this was. This one just makes me a little sad. See you at the top. Yep. So this one's pretty common as well. Students don't draw on a landing at the bottom or the top of the stairs, and they expect us to be able to get from the wall into the stairs. Just be careful of that. Another one, students expect to have the same gradient for a ramp that we do for a stair. Not checking your sections to make sure that your levels from upstairs and downstairs line up properly. I love this one. Yep. Make sure you get that door swing in. And then this one's nice too. This would just come from checking your sections from ground line inside to outside. All right. So errors in drawings are a problem, but we've got some common errors in our research case study as well. So I just want to quickly go through this because we're all submitting this tomorrow too. This is the research side of it. So your case study investigation, your analysis, your readings, all those sorts of things. I'll show you what is not really acceptable, and then I'll show you some examples of the good stuff. So this is very common. Grab images from online, chuck in some dot points, no references, and tell us that that's your ideas. And then chuck in some half-assed sketches with some paragraphs next to it, and that's it. Same thing again, continues, and again, and again, and again. Then we have a similar thing again If we zoom out for this one, they had planned to do more work, but it didn't eventuate. Right. Conceptual understanding. So I want my building to look like a wave. So here's a wave. No sketches, nothing. Precedence, not spelt correctly. Careful of that. Make sure you turn your spell check on in Illustrator or InDesign, whatever you're using. Waves again, still no drawings. Coral. Some material. Basic sketch. All right, so let's have a look at the good ones. Here we go. Beautiful sketching. Lots of annotation. Mix of drawing and text. Scaled down. So the rule of thumb is 50% of the original drawn size, scaled down digitally, looks amazing. If you bring it in at 100% of its original scale, i.e. if you draw it at A4 and you bring it in at A4, tends to look a bit rubbish. It's because the scanner will lose a lot of the nuance and a lot of the details. So we always recommend that you reduce your drawing size down to 50% of what it was originally, and then just put it out, lay it out on the page using Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, whatever you want to do. So shrinking it down always makes your text look better and your drawings look better in terms of the line weights as well. Again, lots of annotation, lots of writing, different colors for different coding. Drawing over the top of precedents. So this is what we're looking for. Before, when I showed examples where it's just a precedent and then some dot points underneath it, put the precedent on the page and then draw over the top of it and annotate the things that you like about it. Don't expect your user, your viewer, to know from looking at the image what you're on about. Same thing again. This exercise, they've just got a little hand model that they made and then they're drawing over the top of it. So rather than spending hours and hours and hours of getting the model to look the way they want it to look, they just rough it out as a mass and then draw over the top of it. Really easy technique and looks great. Again, precedence, sketching over the top, drawing over the top, telling us what's important about it. There we go, that's the Studio Bright House that we've been looking at in the case study for the lectures. Same again. Moving on to another student, lots of beautiful sketching, lots of annotation, probably a little bit too much text in terms of what's going on, but the drawings are beautiful. Lots of sketching, lots of thinking, just stuff, it's a process. It can be ugly, it's part of it. Another student, this one using some Copic markers just to layer in a little bit more love into the pages. Scanned it in. Notice they've gotten rid of all the grey business around all of their scans, which I'll show you how to do in just a second as well. And very important, which a lot of people miss, reference list. Show us all the stuff that you've been doing. You've been reading lots, you've been looking at lots of websites, you've been listening to podcasts or lectures, whatever it is. Put it in there, show us. This one's nice as well. I'd get rid of these big grey bands, don't need that, doesn't add anything to it. But you can tell that this has all been scaled down. So this would have been a page here, page here, page here, page here, but she scaled it all down so that everything looks much nicer on the sheet. And then combined it with precedence as well. So now, instead of just having dot points and precedence, we understand the context of her thinking. Same again, beautiful, lovely stuff. Right, so does that make sense to everyone in terms of what we're looking for the case study? Yes, for the research, what we're looking for? All right, now what I want to do is have a little bit of fun with this. Okay, so one of the first things I got taught how to do when we were in practice was what's called red penning, or you might call it markup. So if anyone who has an iPhone, you see when you go into your photos, there's a little thing called markup. That comes from design language, comes from architecture, design, critical thinking, all those things. So what they would do in practice is after I'd finished drawing up a drawing, the architect, the director would come along and say, not sure why these lines here are dashed, is that supposed to be an opening? If it's an opening, make sure you chuck your glazing line in through there. Why are these trees so big in terms of their dash? Reduce this down. This line along here is way too big. This is not an overhead line. Trees, same again. I'm not seeing what's going on in terms of cut through in here, so I want you to revise that. These steps are dashed. Why are they dashed? Trees again. Need to have glazing and mullions through all of these. Glazing. I'm missing my material in terms of what's going on through here. Stairs are missing an up arrow. Furniture missing through here. And so on. And they'll just keep going around the sheet until everything is covered over. And then I'd have to go back to my desk. And the second part of red penning, which is probably as important, is the highlighting when you've fixed that. So when you've corrected it, you go into CAD, you make your correction, and each time you've done something, you go, okay, I've fixed the stairs now, they're not dashed anymore. And then you highlight it off. Right? Okay, well, I've drawn my table now, so I can highlight that off. I know that I've finished that. I fixed that window line here, so I can get rid of that. I've fixed all of my trees. These are all good now. I've added in all of that texture to show that we've got floorboards there. I've fixed all my windows. I've done all the stairs. And this is now working in terms of more context. Overhead line has been fixed. And so everything on the page that was red penned also gets highlighted out so that you can show that you fixed everything, right? This is a really helpful technique for yourself when you're at home. If you can print off your work, red pen or mark it up, and then go back over it, go back through it, and then highlight off what you've already finished. It makes everything so much more efficient, and it really adds that final 5% of effort that makes 95% of the outcome. So I highly recommend you do that. You can also do it digitally. It's a little bit harder and a little bit more cumbersome, but if you open up your PDFs in Acrobat Pro, you can use comments. And so you can just add little comments around the page, and then what you do instead of highlighting to finish it, just delete each comment one at a time as you finish. And then once all the comments are deleted, you're done. So that's the digital version of it, but I highly, highly recommend it. It makes your life so much easier. All right, that's how you red pen your drawings. How to delete watermarks from drawings. Okay, let's show you how to do this. So which one? Watermarks example. So open up your drawing in Acrobat Pro. What you want to do is you go over to the right-hand side where it says Edit PDF. Click on that. And this is really useful for lots of things. Anything that's in this drawing has now been converted into editable vectors because we're drawing in vectors. So I can click on the watermark, delete it. Click on the watermark, delete it. And I just go around the page and make sure I'm getting rid of everything. If I've accidentally forgotten to hide my viewport line in AutoCAD, what I can do is I can just grab on that viewpoint line and delete that as well. And all of a sudden it's really freshened up the drawing and made it look a lot more professional. Now there's lots of other work that needs to be done on here, but if you're at the final stages and you're just about to submit and you've forgotten to do all those things, the fastest way is just to go into Acrobat Pro, edit PDF, and delete all the stuff that you don't want. Really, really helpful. All right, going back into here. How to reduce your file size without putting drawings into a zip folder. Now this is something that drives a lot of people, lecturers, tutors, crazy. So what I want to do is show you how to do it. This file here is previous student example is currently sitting at 4.5 meg. Now that's not a problem, but I'm just going to do that one because we're running out of time. I was going to show you this 150 megabyte one, how to reduce that, but it takes a couple of minutes to do it. So I'll just show you the same steps on this smaller one so that we don't run out of time. Okay, so open up your PDF that's ready to go. You're ready to send it off to Blackboard. We go up into File, Reduce File Size. File, Reduce File Size. Go back through to where you want it, and then I always do this, don't save over it. You can just put compressed at the end, just in case it ruins your line weights, and you don't want to go back into AutoCAD and export it out again. So then that'll take a little bit of time, depends on the processing power of your computer. Might be 30 seconds, might be a couple of minutes. This one shouldn't be too bad because it was only 4 megabyte, but we can see there it's halved it. So it went from 4.5 megabyte down to 2.1 megabyte. Really, really, really useful for getting your submissions in on time. So always do that instead of zipping. Please don't put it into a zip compressed file. It's a massive, massive pain for your lecturers because it means we need to download every submission and then go through it on our desktop, then go back through it again on Blackboard, and then fill it in Grade Center. Whereas everyone else who just uploads a PDF, it's automatically shown in Grade Center. Right? So there's no workaround. All right, how to name your file properly. So, most common ones we get are these two here. Assessment 1-final. Who does that belong to? Impossible to tell. My least favorite of all, this one here, pdf.pdf. I don't know why, but it comes up all the time. So, this is what we want you to do. And I'm going to put this in tomorrow's weekly Wednesday email so that you know exactly how to do it before you submit tomorrow night. But it's the name of the unit, which assessment it is, your name, your student number, and the date. So methods 2, we're submitting assessment 1, my name is Chris Mewburn, my student number is that, and the date is this. And so that way everything is recorded and collated and we can find your work very easily, and you can find your own work easily. You should get in the habit of using some sort of naming convention for your own files so you can find everything later. And especially when it's the file you're going to submit to Blackboard, because the last thing you want to do, which also happens a lot, is to accidentally submit one of your older drafts. Because you've done all that work, you've worked really hard, and now you've submitted one of your old ones which still has watermarks or still has whatever you don't want to be on there. So please make sure you follow naming conventions, and that'll make your life a little bit easier. Removing grey stuff from scanned sketches in 10 seconds using Photoshop. Now, I know we haven't gone on to learn Photoshop yet. We're doing that later in semester. But this exercise is very, very easy for you to follow along. So what we'll do is I've got a scanned sketch here. I'm going to open it up with Photoshop. And I'll try my best to do it in 10 seconds. All right, here we go. 10 seconds, going over to here. Done. What was my time? 6 seconds, I think. All right, I'll show you how to do it again now so that you all know what you're doing. So I've opened up my scan in Photoshop. Then I go along to this fourth little button along down the bottom right-hand corner, which is called Create New Fill or Adjustment Layer. Just think of it as the one that looks like a little yin and yang symbol. Inside there, we're going to the adjustment filter called Curves. We click on Curves, and it shows us this little map. Easiest way to remember is all of this grey noise that we don't want on our sketches here, because we want to be able to put this on a crisp white sheet of paper. All of that grey noise is this noise that we see here in the graph. So all we need to do is bring the right-hand cursor in front of that noise on the graph, and it's going to remove everything from the background. So that way our scans sit perfectly on a white background. We don't see that grey edge, we don't see the yellow edge, we don't see any of the marks from the scanner, all that stuff. You can also increase the contrast by pulling the left-hand toggle a little bit, just to make your sketch a little bit darker. But as you see here, it will start to bring up some of the smudginess in there. So it depends on how much work you want to put into it. And that's fine. Once that's done, all we need to do is right-click, flatten the image. This is all in the recording, by the way. And then file save as a JPEG or a PNG. And then you're ready to go. That's it. So all you needed to do was open it in Photoshop, open the Curves tool, and then remove all of that grey noise in the background. All right. That was your final tips for the semester. Most important thing to do is to appreciate how valid, how integral it is to mark up your own drawings and to check what you're doing. So hopefully, having gone through all of the previous student examples today, you will have seen some things in your own work that need a little bit of tweaking, that need some adjustments, and you'll be able to mark them off yourself, either by printing off and doing a proper markup, or by just looking at it on screen and making those final tweaks and final adjustments. So a saying that we always had when I was working in practice was that it's the last 5% of effort that's worth 95% of the result. And I believe that. So today, tomorrow, before we submit tomorrow night, it's this last couple of hours, these last couple of bits that are going to pull you up from a pass to a distinction, or pull you up to that high distinction level because you've put in that little extra bit of effort. Does anyone have any questions before we go over to class? Everyone okay? All right, we'll see you back in class. at 10 o'clock.